and a writer, and sort of Amish was like the beginning of my formal writing life, I suppose. But I always sort of wrote privately. And as an actor, I was hired to be in an Arthur Lawrence play, and forgive me if I'm being sort of like Arthur Lawrence, like Gypsy and The Way We Were and West Side Story, and he's this icon. And we sort of took a liking to one another, and so we became pen pals. We wrote letters, and I know it's totally cool, right? And so he was like, you know, you should write a play. And I was like, well, that seems like a good enough reason to start. So you know, so that was sort of like what that started me on, sort of like writing a play. But it was really just for my own outlet and you know, expression and so I did a little bit of that. And the first one I think he told me was pretty terrible, and then I could read Arthur Miller. and then I wrote another, and you know, and he decided he thought that one was great. And so then I was like, okay, I'm done with it. I got my cookie. Arthur Lawrence told me I can write a play, you know. And then I wrote Amish. And so I feel like Amish was sort of you know, intentionally knowing that I wanted to write something that was truly of my own heart and not necessarily for anyone else's approval, and it was really in my own, coming from my own private vernacular. And like everyone else, you know, I was just very totally heartbroken by this tragedy. I just really could not believe that it actually happened. And my husband was actually working in Lancaster at the time, and which was, you know, sort of an odd thing. And another odd thing, I was actually on a treadmill. So these were just, and I was actually watching television, so all these things sort of crystallized into this moment of receiving this event, you know, sort of like directly into my chest, because the, you know, the TV was chest height on the treadmill right here, and it, you know, and it really just lodged itself there and kind of festered into this, both the crime itself, but also the Amish response, and the light and the dark of that so close together, sort of the worst of what we can be to each other as human beings, and also somehow the best of what we can be to each other as human beings. Sort of those polarities so side by side in this one event, and so public, I think is what sort of went in and then sort of festered in there, and eventually that turned into the impulse to write. And it sort of started with the widow and the girls, the two girls. There was sort of this triangle of them, and kind of onioned out from there, and here we are.
Well, the first thing that we did was we did a lot of table work, and we did a lot of talking about the environments that the characters were in, and then we created characters that the characters were talking to, and that gave us the ability to immediately find the actions and intentions of the character. And it also, I think, and that process just made sense to me, because, you know, when you're an actor and you're working on a monologue, it's always like, well, who am I talking to, what am I trying to get, that kind of thing. So I was like, let's have that immediacy in the communication, and that will give us a really good base to start from. So we started with creating that, really laying out the environments that the characters were in, and then we probably did like a week of table work, and then we got on our feet and we did a lot of physical exercises to start, you know, determining the physicalities of characters, and, you know, weight distribution and how it was different and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the beginning of the process, working on this. And when you're directing one actor, you can get away with a lot less, I think, because I think for me, when you're directing, for instance, like a group of college students, I don't know, like, you can give a little inspirational speech that's a little cheesy and get away with it, whereas this, you're like, I'm just communicating an idea, like, this is just one person, you know what I mean? And I'm an actor, so I've tried as hard as I can to stay conscious of how difficult this is to do. I've never done a one-person show. I don't really think I want to. But, you know, so keeping an eye on that and never steering too hard, and just making it, trying to just make it as much of just a communication, less of a, this is what this needs to be, less more, how does this work for you? Because I can instill ideas and talk about ideas and talk about what I believe is important and points and blah, 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 but it's one person. I can't live inside that person and understand how that comes out of that. And when it's one actor, it's just, you know, that's the difficulty of it.
Cool. And for you guys as performers, being a solo performer doing it.
Yeah, well, you know, we were able to create this language between me and James, so I you know, sometimes I wasn't really sure what I was doing, and he knew kind of what he wanted to get, and I was like, well, when I do this, I'm kind of doing this, and he was like, oh, so you're doing this? Yes, I'm doing this, and we kind of like come together and we meet on agreement, and that's how it's very organic. It is weird because, you know, when you're with a cast of an ensemble, which I'm so used to, when we go around the room and we may go, ooh, weird voices. You know, it's a bunch of people, so you don't feel like a fool. But when it's just me, I feel like a fool. So James,
when we started doing the thing exercises, I was like, I'll do it with you, so you're not the only one in the room jumping around.
Yeah, so it's very kind that way. So we would do those funny voices and body things together. So we were able to come up with the characters, and it's, you know, it's a little, the process is a little lonely because, you know, usually you have a cast. You'd be like, oh, that was good tonight, or like, are you nervous, or like, we did a good job. There's nobody here. It's a little strange that way, but you know, you just trust your relationship and the work that you do, and we were just blessed because the writing is so amazing and it's written for an actor, you know, so there's a lot of tricks in there, things that help you as a performer. So.
And for you, did you? Because I imagine as you were writing it, you imagined yourself doing it.
No, not actually.
Okay.
To be honest, like I didn't know when I started writing it that it would be a solo play, and it just started, you know, really feeling like I was listening to these three people first, and then because they were just speaking to me, they were, you know, there wasn't necessarily like back and forth. It was just a kind of, it was a sort of this intimate kind of dialogue where I was just listening, and then kind of through that process, as I was sort of researching Amish culture, and of course sitting in the givens of the thing, which are, you know, that a man did this and it affected these people in this way, and they responded in this way. Sort of the themes of the piece, I think at some point, kind of in the sanctuary of that intense writing experience of really you know, having an intimate relationship with these 7 people, as they began to sort of talk, and I decided that, you know, the gunman part was sort of around for quite a while, but I was like, I don't think you can really play. I think that's probably a playwriting no-no. I mean, like, he just felt, but yet he was there, and so I sort of felt like, the longer that the themes of the piece, as I was sort of steeping and sinking deeper into that, it became clear that there was this kind of common humanity that started to present itself, and I think at that point it occurred to me that maybe I was speaking, maybe I was listening to myself, and that I don't know what character that was, but and then at some point, soon after that, it occurred to me that I was always speaking, that I was each of these people speaking to myself, and then because really the writing of the play was such a intense private experience, I just kind of went with that. Whereas I'd really never done a solo show, and I didn't particularly like them, and they're a very particular animal. And now that I've written one and done one for a long time, I love them. I think that many voices coming through one is religious in nature and utterly gorgeous and totally uber theatrical. And I love it. I think it's an absolutely glorious thing to attempt. But the more that possibility of all of them coming through, all of these voices coming through one, too many. You know, that's kind of went with that, and then it became clear that they would all come through the visage of this young Amish girl, and because it struck me that everyone in the play had a relationship to an inner Amish girl, and whatever we think of that as, and I go from there.
Was there one character that was particularly hard for you to find or to write?
were some that were hard in terms of, some of them were hard to, I don't know if any of them were hard to write. Sometimes it was hard to yield, like it was hard to yield to Eddie, because he frightened me, and I worried that I was calling that near, and then it was hard to be him because he made me so effing sad. Like he just broke my heart, really, and then there were some days that America would make me sad, you know. So it was just sort of that they would change as you probably experienced, like how they sort of sit with you that day, or like in performing in a particular region, like when sort of a certain character would sort of step forward, and I'd be like, oh, wow, they're like really getting shared, like that local woman who talks about the Amish, like her suffering or her plight, like, you know. So it sort of shifts on itself because it's kind of a living thing that is its own, and you're sort of interfacing with it. And it's, you know, the play itself is kind of a crossing between you and like these seven, and it's a funny thing. I sort of don't mean to describe it so esoterically, but it is sort of, it lives in this weird way. But writing it, I don't know, except that I know America made me really nervous. I was like, I just sort of, America was one of the final characters, and I thought, I just had this sense before her that the play was rather conveniently insular and light. And then, you know, as you read about Amish culture, and this really shocked me, you're reading about ethnicity. And I didn't know that. I didn't really think of Amishness as an ethnicity, but that how the Amish identify themselves and separate themselves, and, you know, with their garb and their behavior and their choices. It's about identifying themselves as an ethnic group. And so I think that, and that they came to this country as an ethnic group for particular reasons, which of course were some of the things this country was founded on. And that our country is still a country of ethnicity and of arrival for these same ideals. And yet this play was sort of living in this like space of Americanness as much as it was looking at Amishness. And so this idea of ethnicity was kind of swirling around in there, and I also was struck that there's so much sex that is actually somehow buried in this story, you know, in terms of sexualizing young girls, and Sherry is, you know, had a sexual trauma as a child with her 13, when she was 13 with the principal, and yet there was no sex on stage, and I sort of felt like, where is the female sexuality in this piece, you know, where does that? And this girl started kind of talking, and I remember walking to yoga and sort of hearing her, and she was very sassy and very alive, and was like really in her body, and like really loved thongs, and like I was like, so there's this draft that sort of appeared that was like the Amish Project with America, like, you know, this is kind of like, this is stuff. And then, you know, we started rehearsing, I was like, I can't do an Hispanic accent, like I just thought that, so, you know, like that had a problem. But you know, so I think it was sort of a process.
And then for you two, similar question. In rehearsals, was there a particular character that was just not, it was just a little more difficult to find?
Well, it's interesting because we know we've had two rehearsal processes, because when we did the show in 2011, and what's funny is that we actually had the same amount of rehearsal both times, but we had we had the foundation going into this round of the previous production. So like we actually had like time to really, not just to like mind things, but just to, I think, just feel comfortable.
Right.
So I think the first round, Bill was rough.
Yes.
Bill was rough. Because and we would talk a lot about Bill, but it's just like, how do you, I mean, I love Bill now.
Oh, I love Bill too.
Oh, Bill's great.
Really grounded, but
This is a scholar, the scholar guy.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Professor.
But I mean, maybe because he was the most physically different from me. I mean, he was older, he was a man, you know, boys should just, you know, something that I'm, you know, where I can relate to the other people a little bit more, but physically. We found something that settled in, that worked. Or were you gonna talk about Eddie for this time around?
Well, Eddie's different this time
Yeah, he's
around.
different.
Eddie's very different this time.
Yeah, if you saw it last year, Eddie was, I don't know, maybe a little more likable or something. He was a little more like just a guy that might hang around, and his stance was different. The way he spoke was different, and
Sort of drawing from the moment that Carol says, you know, he wasn't a bad guy, and other moments of the play where you're just like, I think that my goal looking at it was to make him as normal every day, to support the Carol speech going into that one, and then this was just a little sort of different approach this time around. Yeah.
and it was kind of hard to find what that was. That took a while, and to follow his journey from like, I'm not going to talk about it, to okay, here's what I did and here's why I did it. And it is hard to live in that, and it's hard to, you know, you have to find, as an actor, you have to find something that you relate, you know, with him. And it is scary, and I do feel sad for him, but this character. I'm glad he's in there, and I think it's important to show him.
So you all three went to, not together, but in your own separate time and in research, went to Nickel Mines. Is it? I just wanted to.
We went together.
Yeah, I know, you went together. You went in 2008, I think. So I just wanted to hear kind of your reflections on that time, what you learned, what maybe surprised you. And we'll start with you.
Okay. I think on a very basic level, I was just really surprised by the proximity of other houses to the spot. And it's really hard to find the spot.
Did you find the spot? We did not.
It's really hard to find it. The Amish have done a really thorough job at changing the place where this happened, you know, and cleaning it in a way, like cleansing it, in that it's you know, the schoolhouse was torn down, as you probably remember, and what still stands are these 3 trees that used to sort of buttress around, you know, like sort of frame the schoolhouse. So those 3 trees are still there, but and if you look really closely, if you've already found it, you can sort of see where there used to be a gravel driveway to the school. But now it's just a place where animals graze, and I was really surprised, like on all that footage, that aerial footage from the time when it happened, it sort of looks like they're in the middle of this really rural area where no one's around, and it's just fields and fields, and I was really surprised to see that there was a house like across the street, and it's like not a very wide street, you know, there's no paint in the middle of the road to say one way or the other, you know, it's a narrow little road, and there are houses just all along that are, you know, from me to the back of the theater, from door to door, and that was felt like a punch in the stomach to realize that, and to think about what it would take to do something like this while other beings were so near, and parents and neighbors, and I would say that was the most surprising thing, and how I so deeply did not want to be seen. I didn't want to be known. I didn't want anyone to know what I was doing there. I wanted to be invisible and just observe and like absorb and get away and go, but like carry something of it. But and also seeing people hanging laundry as we drove by and in the area, knowing that they have an intimate, intense living memory of this event that they are carrying, and that I'm just writing a play. You know, I just really felt struck by that.
Can I just throw something out to the...
Yes.
I guess I would just love to ask those of you that are here with us, if there were any particular moments in the play that struck you or that you were attached to in some way that you just kind of wanted to comment on or say anything about.
Ben?
This is the fourth or fifth time I've seen the show, and this song is always really beautiful and haunting at the same time.
It really struck me when got to the moment where she says she still loves her husband, and you can feel the entire room get still, and everybody's automatically just focusing on that, and that was really kind of hard to hear, really interesting to hear her speak those words. You can feel the entire room just kind of like stop.
I think what stuck with me through the whole piece is this idea of forgiveness and the idea of joy and pain that we both carry both within us, and can you let something go and then find that joy by letting go? I felt like that throughout the whole piece was something that really kind of stuck with me, and it's beautiful.
I reacted a few times. One that I remember very clearly was when the character, I don't recall your left character here, spoke with anger, with reflection and anger, and juxtaposed the story of her mother, I believe, telling her, I'll be angry for you, you don't have to be angry with the teacher now, and then spoke about, sure, it's easy for them to forgive. We're left with the anger for this, and I thought that had a very real ring, like, hey, you just can't get away with this. Somebody's got to be angry. I was a bit perplexed by the introduction of America. Not that there was a Hispanic background, but I guess I cringed a little bit at her being pregnant and her mother being pregnant. I'm thinking, you know, that made me a bit uncomfortable that the one character who is not of the ethnicity of the others should be the daughter of someone who was also pregnant at a very young age. And the character that I think I felt the most empathy for was the young woman who was seeing her father. And I was curious about the age. What age would you say she was? I thought all the children were very young.
Yeah, there was a range. I think it was from like 6 to 14 or something.
Oh,
Well,
really?
yeah.
I didn't, okay, because that's what I thought. She seemed like a young teenager.
Yeah, Anna was 14.
She was about 14.
Belle was 6.
Okay, now I
Yeah,
understand that.
and the Amish schoolhouses, all different ages, all learn together.
I felt very, I felt moved by her, I think, more than any other character. The idea of forgiveness is a beautiful thing, but the idea also of, hey, someone's got to be angry, you know, that also had a lot of ring of truth to it.
The plot twist where Bill mentions having met Aaron through hitting him and sobbing in the emergency room and the family hugging him, that really resonated really deeply, and it made this whole circle, and it created Aaron. I mean, that was an interesting thing, how Aaron became a character seen through so many different eyes. That was impressive.
That's Donald Crable's story?
No.
No.
I mean, Crable's, Donald Crable is a sort of one of the foremost Amish scholars. He's non-Amish, he's English, as they say. But he's a really nice man, and I happened to meet him. So I read a lot of his books, researching Amish culture, and now I know him as a friend. I met him actually in the Netherlands, of all places. And I was there to perform because it was like the 500th anniversary of the Mennonite faith, and so I was in this like bajillion-year-old Mennonite large building in the Netherlands of the church, and he was there, and I was really nervous about that because he really intimately knows this particular group of Old Order Amish, and he knew those girls, but and has of course been in touch with them, and he's written Amish Grace, and so he's very embedded in Amish culture, and he's the foremost scholar in our country on Amish culture, and but it's not actually his story. Because all the characters are fiction,
Right.
but there was a kind of gently patriarchal, instructive voice that in my research and in the writing that seemed to fit in the play. So that's how this man who's kind of like Crable.
I like the little girl, the girl's reference to the literature of the martyrdom, the man that was I thought the innocent, sort of the painless way she told the story, it really was touching, but it also referenced the history of the Amish, which is a good element.
Yeah, when you learn about Amish culture, you realize that it's not an isolated incident, that this is, there are like literally centuries of Amish forgiveness in play, and that, you know, they're from a very young age indoctrinated by reading together the Martyr's Mirror, which are the original martyrs back in Europe, and being burned at the stake and praying for their persecutors. And it's a really eerie and powerful transition to come in contact with the way we work with children with such a kind of subject. You know, it's a very different thing, and it's really deeply ingrained in them from a very young age.
So just to start wrapping things up here, what are your hopes for an audience to kind of walk away with after seeing, we'll start this production?
I mean, first of all, I just think it's a beautiful piece. So I'm really happy to share it. And the thing that I was really, you know, I mean, there are obvious things I think that come up, but the bravery of the girls was one of the things that really struck me the first time I saw it, and then sitting down and reading it. And you know, the Amish reaction to what happened, and the way that sort of Bill frames it, character Bill frames it, in the sense of when he asked, you know, who am I and could I be more? That's the sort of moment that I always come back to in sort of thinking in my own life, like how do I react to things that happen to me or things that happen to people that kept, you know, what parallels and what's very different from what happened in this case. That's what I walk away from it with, so I don't know if that's what my expectation is, but, you know, some piece of that.
I mean, I don't have anything specific that, I mean, I just, it's, so many people even already have just said they walk out of here changed and moved, and they just, you know, don't feel like themselves for a few minutes, and they kind of just, they're in another world, and it's a powerful piece of theater, and it reminds us of things that are still happening today, you know, and so I hope it, you know, gets dialogues going, and you know, hopefully things like this won't happen in the future, but I'm glad that you all came here and took the journey with us, and I hope we can get more people to do that.
All right, great. So thank you so much, Jessica and Jane. Most valuable marketing resource ever. We're here until February 3rd. These postcards out in the lobby, and I encourage you to continue the conversation either with one of these three lovely people out in the lobby, or at the farmer's cabinet with our coupons afterwards, or any member of Simpatico or Renegade Company. And thank you so much. Thank you.